The overruling of the majority judgment that's taken place by the Chief Justice of India. The Chief Justice of India has gone on to say that they agree with the earlier judgment. Therefore, no immunity on bribery. No immunity to MLAs and MPs in the bribery case is what the Supreme Court has ruled this morning, just minutes ago, having reserved its judgment on the October 5th, 2023, a 7-judge Constitution bench judge. This was headed by the CJI that pronounced its verdict. During the arguments, the centre had submitted that bribery can never be a subject matter of immunity and a parliamentary privilege is not meant to place a lawmaker above law. So legislators were protected from criminal prosecution for bribes in connection with their speech and votes in Parliament and legislative assemblies up until now. The Supreme Court now has changed that and overruled something that took place 25 years ago. And so basically the Chief Justice of India there changing that ruling. Well, now the MPs and MLAs will not be protected as far as bribery is concerned. This is a parliamentary privilege, is not meant to place a lawmaker above the law, is what was said in the Supreme Court minutes ago.
And the authority of the House to take action for a breach of discipline in relation to the acceptance of a bribe by a member of the legislature exist in distinct spheres. The scope, purpose and consequences of the court exercising jurisdiction in relation to a criminal offence and the authority of the House to discipline its members are different. 10. The potential of misuse against individual members of the legislature is neither enhanced nor diminished by recognizing the jurisdiction of the court to prosecute a member of the legislature who is alleged to have indulged in an act of bribery. 11. The offence of bribery is agnostic to the performance of the agreed action and crystallizes on the exchange of illegal gratification. It does not matter whether the vote is cast in the agreed direction or if the vote is cast at all. The offence of bribery is complete at the point in time when the legislator accepts the bribe. And 12.
Well, to get more on this, we have Ashwini Dubey, advocate of the Supreme Court, joining us. We also have Pradeep Bhatti, the spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, with us. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us on the broadcast. Let me just take my first question to Ashwini Dubey regarding the proceedings in court. The Supreme Court has overruled the earlier ruling on immunity, no special protection against bribery in the parliamentary privileges. The Supreme Court says this protection should go. Take us through, the arguments that took place in court today.
Yes, simply, in simple words, the MPs and MLAs who takes money to cast vote to a particular party inside the House are not protected by the law. There are two aspects. One, Article 105 of the Constitution of India that says that the members of Parliament are immune for any speech given inside the Parliament from the prosecution if that violates the law, and the second, if they take money. You remember in 1993 when P.V. Narasimha Rao was heading the government, at that point of time, his government came in the minority. Then the Shibu Soren took money in order to vote. And then the CBI case was registered. In that case, the Constitution Bench of Honorable Supreme Court has held in by 3-2 that the members of Parliament enjoy the immunity. Similarly, here the matter before Honorable Supreme Court was that the Sita Soren, the member of Jharkhand Mukti Morcha, was accused of accepting bribe for vote for a particular candidate in Rajya Sabha election of 2012. Then the CBI filed an official charge sheet against Sita Soren for accepting a bribe for a vote, and case was filed in the High Court of Jharkhand. Then in 2014, the Jharkhand High Court dismissed the plea filed by Sita Soren, seeking to quash the criminal proceedings that had been initiated against her, claiming that she enjoyed immunity under Article 194, subclause 2 of the Constitution, and then that matter was appealed to the Supreme Court. The Honorable Supreme Court, in a significant judgment, very candidly, the 7 judges bench of the Honorable Supreme Court overruled the P.V. Narasimha Rao case judgment, says the bribery is not protected under the parliamentary immunity. P.V. Narasimha Rao case was overruled, in which 5 judges bench by 3-2 majority has ruled that Article 105 provides immunity to the members from prosecution in case where the cash or bribery taken to vote. Then Article 105 deals with the members of Parliament, 194 members of Legislative Assembly. So Supreme Court's significant the view is the corruption and bribery by legislatures destroy the functioning of Indian parliamentary democracy. And that is what the Honorable Supreme Court overruled that. And the center has also supported this case. If the center's argument, you will say, the Honorable Solicitor General stood up to convey the center's stand while argument. He says it is necessary to protect legislatures in the discharge of their legislative and deliberate functions. The act of bribery is a distinct offense and punishable under the Prevention of Corruption Act. So the real issue is not the conscience of the legislative privileges in relation to the parliament or state legislatures. Rather, the short question on which the reference was made, that whether the offense of bribery is complete outside the legislative house. If the offense is committed outside, no question of parliamentary privilege arises. So that is what the Section 7 of the Prevention of Corruption Act was also referred by the Honorable Supreme Court, which said the offense of bribery can be said to be a complete independent of and without reference to anything said or any vote given in Parliament or state legislature. So no question of legislative privilege. Yeah,
right. Mr. Dubey, we also have Sunil Prabhu joining us. Sunil, take us through the crucial arguments leading to the overruling of this judgment after 25 years.
Well, I think this is in the fact that the 7-judge bench was overruling it, that was something that was expected. What is important to note is that they've ruled that just like for the president election, just as it is for the vice president election, in the Rajya Sabha election also, there can be no bribery that takes place. So those MLAs who are being bribed and voting in a particular manner, they can also be prosecuted. And I think that's the underlining provision. That's the big point today, because as the Chief Justice of India himself, speaking on behalf of the 7 judges, say that taking a bribe by a legislature goes against Indian parliamentary democracy, and that in itself is an essence. We must go back to the year 1998 when P.V. Narasimha Rao had just demitted office. There was the famous JMM bribery case which had taken place in 1993 when there was a trust vote at that stage. The video recordings of it was there, but it was never published at that time. There were key players, many of them today, people like Ghulam Nabi Azad and Veerappa Moily, amongst many others who played a key role at that time to help P.V. Narasimha Rao to go through with the razor-thin majority in that trust vote. They needed the JMM MPs to support them. There was a clear case of bribery that had taken place. But in those days, the then Supreme Court had ruled 3:2 favor, saying that parliamentarians, what they do on the floor of the House has legal immunity. Today, the 7-judge bench says, no, it is a derivative. If you have taken a bribe, there is no immunity. It's an act, and clearly you should be prosecuted. So it's in that context that members of parliament, as well as members of legislative assembly, will have to watch out that if they do take a bribe and try to do like the IRAMs and the GAIRAMs that we have seen in recent times, even in a Rajya Sabha election, then they are definitely subject to prosecution.
Right. Thank you so much, Sunil, for getting us all those details. We do have Mr. Dubey with us. We also have Pradeep Bharti, spokesperson of the Samajwadi Party, joining us. Let me take my question to Mr. Bharti regarding this overruling by the Supreme Court. Earlier ruling as far as the immunity was concerned, there's no special protection now against bribery in parliamentary privileges is what the Supreme Court has said, that this needs to go, and how this was destroying the democratic process. So take us through the significance of this decision and what happens going forward if a person takes bribe.
Thank you for having me. We welcome this kind of decisions where bribery is involved or corruption is involved. We always welcome these kind of decisions. But at the same time, when you have the government, BJP government like that, where every opposition party member is being framed in different cases, then there has to be some path or middle path by the government or some instruction by the Honorable Supreme Court regarding framing some opposition leaders. So that has to be also taken care of. We sincerely support any action taken against any corruption issues or issues related that what we have seen in the electoral bond case also, where government has decided to bring that kind of bond which is later on considered as unconstitutional. But at the same time, there are a lot of issues you see in the ED cases. 95+% cases are on the opposition leaders. So this is also needs to be considered, and there has to be some mechanism, definitely by the constitutional by the person sitting on the constitutional positions, may it be Supreme Court or any other institution. But there has to be, with that, there has to be some mechanism where Election Commission also be fair on when they are dealing with the opposition leaders, as well as when there has to be there should not be any bias cases that what we have seen in the past related to opposition and the government, the ruling party. So these things needs to be considered before we make it a fully compliant institutions. Those are related, those are implementing these things in our constitution. So these things has to be considered, and I believe we welcome these kind of decisions, and we believe this has to be taken care of in going forward judgment or in the coming days. This is the only thing which opposition parties are concerned of. Otherwise, we have always stood by the Supreme Court judgment or any constitutional body which gives any decision in the favor of the country and strengthen the process of democracy. We always welcome these kind of decisions.
Right. Let me bring in Mr. Dubey again. The purpose was to allow legislators to cast their votes without fear, but not to protect them from possible violations of criminal law.
That is what the corruption is a different case. So the parliamentary privileges before the lawmakers and our constitution makers, when they brought this Article 105 and 194, thinking that the parliamentarians and legislators may raise their voices and may enjoy their freedom of speech and expression without any hindrance and subject to the outcome, the outside this prosecution. The purpose was very pious. So that the parliamentary privileges were as the special rights, immunities and exemption enjoyed by the two houses of the parliament, their committees and their members. So Article 105 and 194, if you see, Divya, of the Constitution seek to sustain an environment where debate and deliberation can take place within the legislature. The purpose is destroyed when a member is taken money to vote or speak in a particular manner, which we have seen in Mahua Moitra's case also, because of an act of bribery. Because bribery is not rendered immune under Article 105 or 194, because a member engaging in bribery indulges in a criminal act. Because the Prevention of Corruption Act, there is a special statute, Prevention of Corruption Act, which deals with the offenses of the corruption. And if somebody takes a bribery for an act which is to be performed, which is violative of the law, in that case, the Supreme Court said it is destroying the very essence of the parliament and the constitution and the rights given to the members of parliament. And that is what the Honorable Supreme Court says: corruption and bribery by members of the legislatures erode probity in the public life, and therefore bribery is not protected by the parliamentary privileges. Over to you.
Right, destroying the democratic process is what was said in court this morning. Mr. Bharti, will this judgment help decriminalize politics?
First thing is that the only party president who was caught red-handed was Mr. Bangaru Lakshman of BJP. So BJP has lots of things to answer. But at the same time, when we say the other cases where the judgment or the actions has been so quick, in case which my co-panelist was referring to, that without any inquiry and any any prosecution on side of law or only by the Lok Sabha Speaker, that was so quick and fast that there was no chance was given to be heard from the accused who was accused in that case. So in these cases, we have to see that when we are referring any parliamentarian, definitely a parliamentary parliamentarians should be above of doing all these acts whether it's related to bribery and corruption. But the corruption, when you call about corruption, there are laws like the MLA Act, where these acts are amended, purposefully amended to act on the opposition leaders, that we have seen in the past also. So when you have the government which is only totally seeing the corruption of the other opposition leader, and they are clean when they join the BJP. So these kind of acts are when these kind of legislators are sitting in the same parliament. So what do you expect, that what kind of transparency and unbiased attitude will be seen in the parliament? So that has to come from the top. So Mr. Modi and the government has to first realize that if we are so strict, so strict on the corruption front, then you have to act on that. It's not that you bring all the corrupt people into your party and then either their files are being destroyed or they are missing. These kind of acts have been the people of this country are also watching you and seeing your seriousness, what kind of seriousness you have in dealing with the corruption. So this thing has to be dealt with, and it's always better to have a good legislation on this, whether it's related to even to the parliamentarians, and their acts are above any suspicion, and we welcome these kind of steps. But at the same time, BJP government has a lot to answer on this.
Right, exactly. So let's get Mr. Dubey. The judgment of the majority Narasimha Rao, which grants immunity to legislators, has a grave danger, and thus it's been overruled, is what was being said in the Supreme Court. So take us through, the issues and what were the arguments for and against the decision.
See, the first argument was those who are saying that the parliament privileges does not mean that accepting the bribe. The argument was that offense of accepting a bribe is complete at the time of acceptance, regardless of performance. Because the purpose of the constitutional provision was to protect the legislative process integrity, not shield individuals from the criminal proceedings arising out of a betrayal of electorate's trust. And that is what, proposing the essential functions test, the narrow interpretation of the provisions is stating that immunity should not extend to acts remotely connected to legislators, then the criminal liability should apply equally to legislators as to any other individual without the clock of immunity for acts outside their official functions. And those who were supporting the Sita Soren's case, there was one of the argument that the Narasimha Rao judgment highlighting the caution needed when considering overturning long-standing precedents. The argument was that the concept of constitutional privilege and immunity was a crucial pillar of constitutional framework aimed at safeguarding legislators from executive influence. And that is what one of the argument was, that the historical evaluation of legislative immunities emphasizing the need for legislators to be free from fear of prosecution to vote fearlessly. But the Honorable Supreme Court says that you have a right to cast your vote freely, also right to freedom of speech and expression, but moment bribery is taken for performance of any act, then the Prevention of Corruption Act will come in play. So that is what the parliamentary immunity or legislative immunity does not mean accepting bribe. The gist of this matter, because it destroys the very essence of the privilege.